pop culture peaked in 2008. Matt Walsh, if you know who he is, he's a commentator for the Daily Wire. He talked about it on video today, but he shared something that a lot of people, this is not necessarily a left-right thing per se, because Matt Walsh is conservative, but he kicked this off and he had some really interesting things to say, and then other people commenting on him. So let's start with the original tweet. If you would, Badger, I can make it larger if you want to.
I see it. I got it. Pop culture peaked from 2007 to 2008. There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, Zodiac, Michael Clayton, Into the Wild, Superbad, The Assassination of Jesse James, all came out in 2007. The Dark Knight, The Wrestler, and Tropic Thunder, perhaps the last great comedy, were released in 2008. They were still making great children's movies at this time too. Ratatouille in 2007 and WALL-E in 2008. An absurd number of greatest TV shows of all time were on the air. The Wire, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, The Office. That is arguably 5 out of the 10 greatest shows ever made. It's been downhill ever since, and a very steep hill indeed. What happened? I have my theories. I'm interested in yours.
Well, he goes on, a couple things. Read these two that he added to his original.
I didn't even list all of the really good films from that time. In Bruges, yes, once. And then Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. Some interesting indie stuff like Synodoche, New York. I've not seen that one, obviously. Just an Embarrassment of Riches. My theory. 2 things happened in 07-08 that explain the drop-off. The first is Obama's election. The era of wokeness and killed all forms of risky or provocative artistic expression, at least in the mainstream. The second and far more important factor is the release of the first iPhone in 2007 and the rise of social media at the same time. That was the death of the monoculture, our shared cultural experience. Now the culture is fragmented into a million pieces, driven by algorithms which are designed to feed us a nonstop diet of lowest common denominator slop. There's a reason why music peaked a little earlier than movies and television. The fragmenting of the music industry began with Napster and file sharing services almost a decade before. The music monoculture had already mostly died by the time movies and TV were peaking. By 2012, it was over.
Now, I'm going to show you one of the responses to this, but I want to hear what you guys think. When he says peak, it doesn't mean that since 2008, some really remarkable films have not been released. There have been quite a few, but at the time you could expect in any given year, you could expect a lot of great films. You'd have a top 10 list. I can't for the life of me come up with a top 10 list for the current year. I can't come up with it. And top 5, I'd be stretching it. Now, the movies are now all out. We're nearing end of October, but it's getting close. And I talked to colleagues in the CCA. That's the organization Alan and I are both in, Critics' Choice Association. And the people keep asking, what have you seen that's great? Not much is the answer. What do you think about this take? And I want to show you one of the more astute responses, but go ahead.
I'll add one more to 2008 was also the housing crash. And and like me, people didn't have money. And when people don't have money, the studios don't have money. And so now you can't you can't make as many and you can't make them as good.
But also movies take 2 years to make, if not longer.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at what's really interesting is to see like one of those movies, There Will Be Blood, was Paul Thomas Anderson, and you have Paul Thomas Anderson's movie One Battle After Another in theaters right now that I think Matt Walsh would say is diametrically opposed to the Paul Thomas Anderson movie he's citing that he loves, even though no one seems to understand that One Battle After Another is a loosely based adaptation of Thomas Pynchon's book Vineland, which came out decades ago. And it's such a weird, I would say that cultures from your perspective where you're looking at it, but he's right that if you take that list and just look what happened to people, David Fincher's no longer making theatrically released films. He's working for a streamer. Joseph Kahn, I actually retweeted this Matt Walsh thing that Joseph Kahn had retweeted. And I was agreeing with what Joseph Kahn said, is that the thing that also started to happen was streaming, and the whole economics behind streaming as opposed to theatrical marketing. Yeah, they're right there.
Yeah, here it is. Since you referenced it, I had it ready to go, Rob.
Oh, well, there you go.
If you would read this, Badger, this is
just real quick.
Kahn. Go ahead, Badger.
We'll go about the timeline, because you could go back to the Yuri Bezmenov stuff, but starting at 2008, sure, Obama became very polarizing. You would have thought that was the end. We got a black president, we're done. But unfortunately, that ignited a whole new talking about race. And then Roberts talked about it before. Evergreen College, really all the colleges, started getting super taken over, and then they produced propagandized people that then went into the industry and just started, you can't say that, and instead of, we all know what happened. So that is also a huge part, and then add in everything else on top, and it's a mixture for disaster. All right, Joseph Kahn, he says, Wall Street money flooded in during the streaming boom thereafter. Studios, executives, producers were drunk with cash, and a culture of waste exploded. No longer chained to profits, with everyone shifting to subscription speculation, they started greenlighting based on what made you popular at dinner parties, luxury beliefs, and virtue signals. I'm not just Hollywood, I'm awesome, promote me. It was no longer about the most talented artist or stories, but who or what checked off boxes. After all, it didn't have to make any money. The product sucked, with no accountability as long as Wall Street money kept at it. A false sense of security permeated the industry, especially with the new generation of executives, artists that believed this sort of bubble was permanent. It wasn't. Sorry, and just you add in State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, and all those fund investment firms that specifically were pushing these ideals. People didn't have to, they didn't need our money. They had those people's money, and so they could let us fall to the wayside. Happened in video games too.
Yeah, audiences don't matter, or didn't matter then. I can also tell you in 2008, that was the beginning of, basically YouTube had a great creator fund. It had a lot of money in it. And a lot of people who started doing YouTube content made a lot of money in 2008. And I would talk to college students. What do you want to do after you graduate? I want to be a content creator. And I in my mind, I kept thinking that spigot is going to end pretty soon. That someone's going to shut it off, and you're not going to have any money by the time you think you're popular. And what are people going to do when there's no money left to pay creators?
Yeah. You have to go back to merit base, but all of a sudden you're in a system where everyone got there not on merit base for the most part, and it's like very sink or swim now.
But a lot of the popular YouTubers started in like 2007, and people just started creating their own content, and that just became another platform for entertainment. You just
and it didn't take that much.
100%. I think that's a really user-generated content that never existed before. Not like this.
Yeah, and it was a lot easier to make money. I remember my first YouTube account; it was automatically monetized once I signed up. And I spent the 50 cents I earned well.
And because I see the chat, you could say old men yell at clouds, talking about Matt, but like everything that we as a group have said has come to pass. When Chris made the comment about turning the boy brands into girl brands is going to be the most costly mistake, it has proven to be the most costly mistake. Well, we said all of these things won't stand if you make them all girl bosses, you take away all storytelling and meritocracy, all that it'll fall apart. Why do you think all the movies keep losing all the money?
Well, another thing to follow up on that is that normally in the real world, when Chris would say something like that, immediately you would have somebody that would say, that's interesting. Let's run that down. Let's talk about that. Now, if somebody floats an idea, like you just pointed out, that turns out to be true, it's immediately rejected. You're called a bunch of names, and nobody actually thinks about what it is you just said.
Yeah,
which was already at that point proven true with the character of Rey centering the Star Wars sequel.
We just hate women, Rob, and we were upset that he didn't give it to him. Like,
that's the thing that I've found the most disappointing is that people can't float ideas anymore and have a discussion about them. It immediately suddenly polarizes everybody, and that person becomes a pariah or that person becomes, it was really interesting. Speaking of Matt Walsh, I answered a question. I read an article that was, I think it was in science.org or something. And this article, it was a long-term study of the differences between men and women. And while we've known this for a long time, it had a lot more markers about why women live longer than men from a scientific basis. And I'm like, I finally have an answer to what is a woman. What is a woman is an adult female of the species that will live longer than the male version of that species. And that's a scientific based answer that I can sit there and now I can say that no one can get mad at that because they're looking at the scientific. I mean, of course, that doesn't get into the realities or whatever you want to believe. This is a scientific study that proved this. And I think that if I were to say it, I was saying it in a humorous context, and I finally have the answer, but people get mad at reality. Mm-hmm. They're mad at reality because they would rather their feelings, we don't care, truth or facts don't care about your feelings, but it's true. And somewhere along the line, we made it, not only do people not care, but they're offended by truth.
Because to them it's a lie because they got their own reality, right?
But that's a bizarre, that's a bizarre, like if you're in a house that's caught fire, you're not going to ever say to somebody, you know what, we really shouldn't leave. Let's stay here because I don't think the house is going to burn down. Yeah. I think it might not. Yeah. I mean, it's such a weird world that we live in, that where did people's opinions and feelings, why do they supersede the reality of what you know? And by the way, why would reality suddenly become offensive to people? That's what's really weird to me, is that
just Rob, we've had so many throughout the years, incredible conversations over long dinners, at barbecues, at hotel bars, at cons, or gatherings where our mutual friend John Schnepp, who we all love and lost in 2018, we had a conversation that lasted 30 years.
Right.
Yeah, we met in the early 90s, and we just picked up where the last conversation left off. It was like a podcast that lasted decades. And I love to talk ideas. I love to have my mind swayed or learn about something. I don't know about that franchise or ideas or this book. I found out about Project Hail Mary from you and Elaine at Nerd Cookies. Didn't know about it. I just missed it. I don't know everything. And then immediately read it and was blown away. So I love and we could talk. I'd love to have a whole conversation. I think there's a sequel to that book that must be written. We'll talk later. But what I'm saying is Matt Walsh has a point, and it's partly in what you also brought up. People are afraid of that confrontation. So difficult ideas or ideas that they're afraid will be challenged aren't brought into the conversation, or even like I believe that, yes, there are some old stereotypes, old Hollywood stereotypes that were probably overdone, right? The damsel in distress, it's been done. I still think there's something to that. It's been overdone, but there's an overcorrection of we don't do damsels in distress or Disney princesses. Now we have badass girl bosses. That's too far a correction. Mm-hmm. I recently watched The Princess Bride. Damn, does that hold up?
Tron Legacy, just because I was just watching it.
Yes.
Korra saves Sam, and then Sam saved Korra, and then they fight together, and balance.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a reader in the live chat that's Christopher Moonlight Productions says, Rob, it's because the schools intentionally did away with reading comprehension. We navigate our surroundings through narratives, but all the narratives have been deliberately broken to control kids. I would agree with that. I mean, if you read about how many Ivy League students, they can't concentrate and read an entire book because they never had to do it in high school. And there was I think it was in the Atlantic. I was reading this article. I'm thinking to myself, this is insane. And I think, look, I use Star Trek as an example. Star Trek has become so bad because it's a science fiction show being made by people that don't understand the genre of science fiction. And they're like, we got to make this like Buffy. We have to make this like Angel. We have to make this like anything other than what it is, which is Star Trek.
And no hope for the future. So there's underlying current of just.
I can speak to that because I have a child in high school and she is reading the Odyssey, but she is not reading the book. She is reading excerpts that the school is giving her to read.
Oh, that's
what?
The cliff notes, essentially?
No, they're just chapters. You know,
and that's, by the way, that's what schools are now giving kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Not
how do you
know? It's been that way. The last time she read a book was
No
2
Child
years
Left
ago.
Behind, so you kind of have to do something like that.
I mean, that's that's
it-
horrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Conversations are all well and good, but it's impossible to have them with a brick wall.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that people are afraid to have conversations. I think that people are ready and willing to have conversations. You just can't have them with someone who is not willing to see your side, not willing to consider your point of view, and not willing to bend or break or, you know, differ in their beliefs at all. So it's basically you're having a conversation with a brick wall. A lot of these students, you know, have a lot of people on the left have replaced morality, religion, you know, whatever, with ideology, with everything that they've been taught. And they've been taught that anybody who has a different opinion than theirs is their enemy. It's basically their political enemy, which is why we see people celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, things like that, because they see him as a political enemy who needs to be taken out. They've replaced morality and, you know, willingness to have all of these conversations with their one point of view, and they're not ready or not willing, not ready, but not willing to have any type of conversation like this. It's why you have so many people just yelling at someone who's just trying to have a conversation and they don't want to have that conversation. They end up yelling at them. They call them names, they call them slurs, they call them whatever they want. And then they either get violent or they just walk away. So it's impossible to have conversations with those types of people. You need to have an open mind in order to have a conversation, and they just do not have an open mind. And I think that when these types of people go into the industry, it's not that they don't understand the property like Star Trek and Star Wars. It's that they don't care. They only care about their ideology and putting that into whatever they're creating, because I don't think that they're creating anything. That's what they care about.
Here's where it gets scary, because when Chris, you made the comments about, you know, Star Wars and Marvel being a boys brand now being a girls brand, you were presenting a provocative thought and by provocative meaning it's to provoke you to think about it, to think about what is said. Nowadays, just I think what people don't want is for others to think about things, to take an issue and just kind of figure out what are both sides, what do I agree with. You know, it's you believe this or you don't. For example, it's insane to me what's going on with John Fetterman. He votes 97% of the time with the Democrats in the Senate.
Yep.
3% of the time he doesn't, based on principle, and they want to primary him for that 3%.
Before we move on, I wanted to say something. It's two things about the reading comprehension. First, this is a very old problem that there's. Both of these are George Carlin things, but one is when he had a whole bit about first it was Head Start, then No Child Left Behind, Head Start, Left Behind, someone's losing ground. And that has only increased in the 20 plus years since that joke, where I'm seeing teachers and like every once in a while a subreddit for like whatever will pop up and you'll see them. She's in middle school and she can't teach the kids because none of them can read at like, they're all in 3rd and 4th grade level. And that goes to the other George Carlin quote that's always stuck with me is the quality of people's thinking can only be as good as the quality of their language, because we think in language. And so when these kids don't read anything, they don't have any vocabulary, they don't have to think about things beyond basic bitch level. This is what we get. You just go straight to anger and hitting because they don't have any way to verbalize.
Absolutely. And you see it all over TikTok with the TikTok teachers that that actually care about their students and they care about students' progression. Going on TikTok, really worried about these kids because they'll be at high school. The teachers will be teaching high school and their kids can't read past like a 3rd grade level, and it's very concerning for them. They have no attention span, especially you see that with the elementary and middle school kids. They don't have the attention span to to uh to stay focused on a lesson. They don't have they're not retaining any information. A teacher will teach them something and ask them questions about what they just learned, and they can't answer a single one.
And
So
teachers are powerless to change any of
it
that.
it's really I don't know. It's just it's insane, the level that students are at right now. It's actually really scary, and I think that COVID made it worse because kids were already, struggling before that, and then you had 1-2 years at home, not really in a classroom setting, doing whatever they wanna do, and it's just it really threw these kids who were already sort of struggling behind by 2 years.
But where the parents working. The parents are fucking working because everything is $1 billion now.
But I would go back even further, because what Badger was saying, we started infantilizing children years before social media. And like when I was I went to a pretty good public school, but when I was going to public school, if there was a problem, like if I brought home grades that were not up to snuff, I got the talk. My parents or both or one of them, my dad would come in and go, look, you're fucking up.
Summer school was a threat.
This is a problem. Yeah. Your teachers say how smart you are and you're pulling a 2.8 GPA. I mean, come on. This is you. This isn't me. This is you not doing the work. And my dad was right. He's like, you're not doing the work, and you're not doing the work, and you're filling your days with other things, which is not what's going to help you. And he made the point. He said, look, the point of school is not just that you're doing your assignments. The point of school is that it is instilling in you the idea that you have to work at something to achieve your goals. School is practice for that. Mm-hmm. And your daily assignments, you might not like doing your math papers, but what that is it's protecting you and also showing you how the real world works. These kids today have no sense of that. That's why everybody wants to be a communist. Well, I think the workers of the world should control the means of production. And then you ask them, well, where do those means of production come from in the first place? They have no answer for you. Well, I hate capitalism. Really? Well, before we had capitalism, everybody grew their own food. Everybody worked on the farm. You got up at the crack of dawn. You worked until the sun went down. And then you cooked your meal and you did everything on your own. There was no place to go to buy stuff. You want to go back to that way of living? And nobody does. But nobody even seems to want to put in any work. If anybody's uncomfortable in any way, then they lash out and they don't. I mean, what is that? Where is that going to lead us?
Real quick, I was fortunate to be a reader as a kid.
Me too.
Not only comic books, but lots of books. Roald Dahl in 3rd grade read,
everything.
Willy Wonka, The Chocolate Factory, and the sequel, The Great Glass Elevator.
Danny the Champion of the World. James the Giant.
Remember your first book?
Yeah, all these books were.
James the Giant.
I love them, but it was habit.
The Giving Tree.
Mother read to me and my sister, and Sunday was reading newspapers and books, sitting on the couch.
The rabbits.
It was a habit, and I passed it along to my kids. I read them books, and then they got interested and read their own books. But there's a point that Matt makes in this thread that we've overlooked, and that is what this has contributed to is us not being connected by culture, meaning one thing that we all experience and then discuss, whether it be music, bands, a popular book, a movie that connects us, some positive film that we've all seen. And you just, and sometimes I remember seeing Dances with Wolves in the early 90s when it came out. And that movie was big the year it came out, whatever you think of that film, but it was something you could discuss, right? Like you knew everyone would go see it. So many of these movies we talk about here on Friday, our lowest views of any live stream Alan and I do is on Friday when we review all the new movies in theaters because no one cares about them and people don't see them. And I mean, you saw Black Phone too, Rob, but there's not that motivation to go experience. Here's the big thing. And when I look at past years, take any weekend from the 80s and 90s, it's unbelievable what we
the
had
Matrix ended up being right. Like, you know, when
in 1999,
when Morpheus explaining to Neo and he shows him, you know, here it is, the peak of civilization. I used to think that was whatever, but now as I get older, I was like, well, that's not exactly wrong.
It's all, where is the culture connecting us? It's not. It's
not going this way. It's going this way. It's going down.
Look, there are more YouTube channels and YouTubers talking about movies than movies made in a given year. Like there's about 8,000 movies made in a year. Anyway, sorry, Steph.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to agree with Justin in the chat. I was thinking Game of Thrones was the last time that I really remember like getting together with friends and watching the latest episode of Game of Thrones and then talking about it afterwards. Like we would have Game of Thrones parties, you know, we would get together, watch it, and then talk about it afterwards. That's the last time that I remember talking about something that was good until it wasn't. But that's the last time. Now I think that like it's once in a while you'll get a really good thing, but I think that the reason people are kind of staying away from the movies is because of the stuff that's being put into it, and we live it every day. We want to go to the movies to escape from everyday life, from being reminded about all the crap that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And the fact that you go into a movie just to be sort of reminded about, you know, every day, all the stuff that's happening on a daily basis. It's not really an escape, you know, so, and people want to escape. And so every now and then you'll get something great like Godzilla -1, you know, you'll get
by the way, from a different culture,
something like that.
I mean, not an American movie.
Not an
The best
American
movies
movie.
are always foreign.
Even a movie you would expect we could all be connected by is tainted by modernity. I mean, I look at the way I'll connect it to Dune, the way that Chani's character is changed, like completely, by doing that, by making her not a big supporter of Paul. It changes the whole. I don't know how they will wrap it up. It's not going to be what we're going to see. Is not Dune Messiah as Dune Part 3. It's going to be an amalgam of how Denis changed the story. He's going to use elements of Messiah and probably children of Dune as well. And what they did to Chani was wrong. It changes everything.
Well, and you know, it's funny. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just watched Dune again. You know, there's talk about peak verisimilitude, but what's interesting about the end of that film as opposed to the book, in the book, when Paul says he's going to marry, you know, Princess Irulan, and there's a great scene between Chani and Jessica at the end, where Jessica's like, "We're both wives. You know, we have to do our duty." And what's going on is part of the culture of, you know, the Landsrat, and you guys might be in love, but Paul's marriage to Princess Irulan that has to happen, you know, and she's kind of resolved to that fate. But in the movie, in Dune 2, as soon as Paul says, "I'm going to marry you," it's like Chani has no understanding or recognition of the culture, and she's just mad because, "How dare you give up our love, Paul?" And that's it's such a betrayal of what about the culture that he's portraying. It's so modern for her to get all upset.
Yeah, Elaine really needs to be here, Nerd Cookies, to go into this. But that's the one thing I'll quote her, and I agree with her, is that the one thing about the Dune books, horrible things happen to characters. Awful, terrible, like the worst. The most pure thing about that book, the one glint of hope, was their romance. There was such dedication and love. And that made the books endearing because that was the shining light, was the love of Paul and Chani. When the last shot of Dune Part 2 is her, I foresee other changes happening that are not as good. But this is what I'm saying is even something like Dune Part 1 and 2, which I did really enjoy, is tainted by the obligation for things to be of a certain way because you can't take risks. And a lot of that is, I don't know, it's something I think other cultures don't care about. Japanese, maybe that's why anime is so popular. They don't care, but it's really, I think 2008 is when you can say, hey, that's when that was the last peak year. And we've seen signs, and it's now, I think with AI, we're in for dark times for art. And having said that, I think some indie filmmakers will be able to build some huge Hollywood-like franchise.
Oh yeah,
using AI as a tool to be competitive with Hollywood. It's another nail in the coffin. I think AI will be used by Hollywood in all the wrong ways, and indies are the best chance for AI to be used in a way that will be an expression of true creativity. So I have a nuanced take on that. So